Russian disinformation is present not only in Ukraine, not only in Europe, not only in Poland. It's especially present in mm, Africa, in Southeast Asia, and in Latin America. In Latin America, there are different channels. There are media, there are social media, and there are politicians who voluntarily spread Russian propaganda. This is the topic we are going to talk about today in Black Sky Stop Fake podcast. My name is Piotr Mateusz Bobołowicz, and let's begin. And with me today, Volha Siamaszko in Vilnius.
Good evening, everyone.
And Antonio Jimenez in Lublin.
Good evening.
Antonio, you live in Poland right now, but you're originally from Venezuela, and you know the specific of the region. So tell us, what's the picture of Russian state-sponsored media in Latin America?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, it's important to know that the Russian influence in Latin America is not primarily military or economic, but also communicative. It operates through narratives, symbols, and information flows that are embedded in our media systems and political debates. And once again, the influence relies heavily on existing anti-American and anti-Western sentiments in the region. The Kremlin communication strategy in Latin America is built around two flagships outlets, RT en Español, the most popular channel of disinformation, and Sputnik Mundo. RT en Español, launched in 2009 and headquartered in Moscow, maintains bureaus in several Latin American capitals. Like they have their main offices in
One
Caracas.
small intervention. I will just say RT, which is now RT, but used to be called more explicitly Russia Today.
Russia Today, yeah, it was the previous name. Now it's known as Rusia en Español, ¿sí? RT en Español, sorry. So they have headquarters in Caracas, Managua, and Havana, and has become one of the most visible foreign news brands on Spanish language, television, and online. So these outlets serve at least three functions. Firstly, they provide a continuous flow of news and commentary framed from an explicit pro-Kremlin and often anti-Western perspective. Independent analyses have shown that RT, or RT en Español, and Sputnik never critically examine Russian domestic or foreign policy. Russia is consistently portrayed as either victim or problem solver. Secondly, they act as content factories. Their material is reproduced and reframed by local media, by ideologically aligned regional channels such as Telesur, for example. Telesur is a very big channel broadcasted in Latin America in the public television, and by a vast ecosystem of smaller websites and influencers. And thirdly, they function as hubs for social media dissemination. Studies show that RT en Español content circulates widely on platforms such as X, Facebook, often boosted by false or coordinated accounts, which increases its visibility far beyond its direct audience. In Venezuela, Russian media and the government's own outlets have developed particularly close relationship. We're talking now like about not a government, but we have a narco-terrorist regime which cooperates and works very closely with Russia. Investigations by Venezuelan and international organizations showed that the state-run channel BTV, this is the national like channel in Venezuela, which is controlled by the regime, and other pro-government media rebroadcast RT en Español. So we have BTV that about 80% of the population have it in the public television, and they rebroadcast RT content and replicate its narratives in their new programs. So first, this is okay. This has two consequences. The first, it normalized Russians' perspectives on issues such as the war in Ukraine, sanctions, NATO, and the United States, presenting them as part of the ordinary new flows rather than as foreign propaganda. Also, it's important to remember that it reinforces a shared ideological framework between Caracas and Moscow. Both regimes describe themselves as victims of hybrid wars. This is interesting. So they describe themselves as victims and economic blockades, and portray their alliance as a pillar of a new multipolar order against the U.S. Hegemony. Here, pro-Russian politicians are not marginal figures. The governing elite itself adopts and amplifies Kremlin talking points, which are then echoed by sympathetic commentators, party-aligned intellectuals, and official diplomatic accounts on social media. So,
And yeah, before we move to the topic of the politicians, I would like to say I have myself an experience of living in South America, in Ecuador, and that's true that people often seek for different sources of information, the ones they consider independent from. But from our point of view, from Europe, they are not independent. We know they are not independent, but they are independent from the United States. They are independent from the West, the collective West. But about this topic, we have another podcast, and I invite you to watch it. This is just specifically dedicated to Russian narratives and what Russian narratives have in common with the reality of Latin America and the ideologies present in Latin America. By the way, on margins, I'm drinking yerba mate, talking about Latin America. And Volha, could you give us some insights about those politicians, the politicians that are linked to Russia? Because it's not a new thing. It's not since 2022 or 2014 that Russia has some, I would say, some very strong connections in Latin America.
To understand what Russia wants to achieve with its propaganda in this region, you first need to understand what its interests are. Latin America is a place that Kremlin sees as an important area for its globally rivalry with the West. To get the support of local politicians, Russia presents itself as an alternative to the United States nowadays. For example, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov recently said that the United States used an old principle, divide and conquer, in Latin America, and Russia offers equal, respectful cooperation based on mutual benefits, on international law, and respect for sovereignty and non interference. Ryabkov also stressed that almost no country in the region, except the Bahamas, has joined anti-Russian sanctions or agreed to send weapons to Ukraine. And for Russia, it's very important thing. Because of this political background, of this political environment, Russia feels comfortable working with these countries, and Russia supports local presidents, invites them to Moscow, hosts some economics forums, and promises investments and financial help for these countries. And because of this political support, it becomes for Russia easier to have to influence society. students of Latin America offered scholarships to study in Russia. Businesses are promised to join projects and so on. And for Russia, there are no political limits, no political barriers on spreading its propaganda in this region. And that is very different from the situation in Western countries, where Russian media are blocked. Russian propagandists are expelled, and it's too hard to find some workers, some people, some person willing to work for Russia propaganda in Western countries. And another important point that the many politicians from Latin America studied in Soviet Union. There was a special high school, People's Friendship University, created for foreign students and for many young people from Latin America. It was some kind of social lift, and that helped them build a political and diplomatic career back home. And today, Russia actively used this nostalgia and these historical ties. And for example, in April 2025, Russia organized several public events to celebrate its long-standing friendship with countries in this region. And the main message was historical friendship and historical relations. And at all these events, Russian diplomats repeated that it has no political demands, only friendship built or cemented of many years of cooperation.
And Antonia, would you like to add something to this topic of politicians?
Yeah, well, this is a very good point because, like, we have across the countries in Latin America, pro-Russian politicians and opinion leaders that act between, like, as intermediaries between Russian state and local publics. They mainly legitimize Russian outlets, as Volas said, when presidents, ministers, or influential parliamentarians give exclusive interviews to RT en Español or Sputnik, or frequently quote them, they send a signal that these sources are respectable and reliable. They translate narratives into local languages. Russian talking points are adapted to national debates. And also, they integrate them into partisan polarization. In highly polarized contexts, pro-Kremlin messages become one more weapon in the domestic struggle between government and opposition, rather
And
than external threats to be critically examined.
And Olga mentioned one important topic, that it's more difficult to find for Russia to find the people who are willing to work for Russian disinformation in Europe, for example, than it is in South America or Latin America in general. And I think there are many reasons for that. There are, of course, those ideological reasons that we are going to talk that we are talking about in different podcasts. But I think also there are economical reasons, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but the problem of corruption in Latin America uh, is uh, is big. There is a large problem of corruption, and many corrupted politicians. mm, they the West, at least on I would say a narrative level, condemns corruption, and doesn't want to have a lot to do with corrupted politicians. And for Russia, it's not a problem. They accept corrupted politicians. They like corrupted politicians. They
Yeah.
like corrupting politicians.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can
So
see an example in Venezuela, for example. Nicolas Maduro has a very close ties with Putin. We can see an example in Nicaragua. Daniel Ortega, for example, very close ties with Russia. We can see the Cuban regime also cooperating in many spheres, not only military but also economic.
And also, there is a question of journalists, for example, who are just willing to take a job that's well paid. And usually, those Russian jobs are pretty well paid in the region, for the region. Yeah. And they usually don't have different opportunities of work, or the opportunities are scarce or less paid. And it's a lucrative job to work for Russian disinformation, even though if you're asking yourself if you're doing good or bad things, sometimes you don't. Uh, but yet people just need money, and many people are in such situation that they need money. They need money for and this economical motivation is very important. Olga, one more question to you, uh, because Russian disinformation apparatus is often supported by Belarus. Is it also the case in the subject of Latin America?
I want to say a paar words about this journalist working for Russia propaganda. Yes, and what about Western countries? It's very difficult to find some person who want to work for Russia propaganda because of questions of national security. You can be a spy, you can be an agent of influence, and of course, you go uh, to prison when you are working with Russian propaganda. And what about Belarus? Lukashenko, of course, has own interest in Latin America. He regularly meets with representatives of Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and let me remind that he had a particularly close relationship with Hugo Chavez, and uh, Hugo Chavez was Belarus' greatest friend in the region. And what about Belarusian propaganda in Latin America? I only found a few propaganda channels in Spanish, and this is more informational than propaganda resources.
I also think that there is an important reason for why people in Latin America listen to Russian media, and it's simply that they don't always lie. We in Europe we perceive usually Russian media as purely disinformation sources, but it's not true. They can report, and in my opinion, it's one of the most sneaky and dangerous way of conducting these information operations. That they can inform credibly on some events, building the credibility, showing, for example, some topics that are neutral, uh, showing them objectively, showing them in a good journalist doing good journalist work on those topics, but at the same time, it legitimizes them and give them permission to put their narratives, the disinformation narratives, in other topics that are sensitive for Russia, that are important for Russia, that are spreading some sentiments towards Russia or towards the West that are according to Russian narratives. And I think that's a serious problem of Russian media in the region of Latin America. And many of the channels work in the internet, especially on social media. And Antonio, tell us, how is the situation of social media in Latin America is, from my perspective, from my experience, people like social media very much, and but I'm not sure if many of them is cautious enough using them.
Yeah, indeed, the region has very high levels of social media use, and it's very sad to say, but also a very low level in media literacy. That's a big problem. Research on disinformation in Latin America shows that platforms such as Facebook, WhatsApp, and TikTok, also Telegram, are key channels for the circulation of political disinformation and foreign propaganda. We can say that there is a high dependence on mobile devices and messaging apps for many citizens, especially in poorer or rural areas. WhatsApp forwards or Facebook posts are the main sources of news, and verification is extremely difficult. Now in X we have something new that it checks the authenticity of the new. Also, we have algorithmic amplification of polarizing content. Content that provokes anger, fear, or indignation trends to travel further and faster. We know that Russian narratives about Western hypocrisy, conspiracies, and media manipulation fit very well into this logic. So we have like very high, or let's say, a lot of people use social media, but also one of the biggest problems is that these people are not. They have a low literacy of how to verify the information. They don't know the tools about to verify the sources, and they just they forward this information, and a lot of people read this and they believe that it's true.
At the same time, that's one interesting thing. Meta has forbidden all the political and social advertisement on Facebook or on Instagram in European Union. It's forbidden now. It's not possible to pay for social or political ads. At the same time, in certain countries, without being verified in any way, you can pay to spread whatever propaganda you want, especially in Colombia and Peru.
Yeah.
You can do it. In a way, of course, it can also be useful because you can try to spread, uh, I would say, not propaganda, but some useful information. But of course, the internet has a big bias towards the disinformation, unfortunately, and that's a serious issue. I hope our channel will reach some people in South America and will give you some tools to withstand, to fight against disinformation in your countries. Thank you very much. With me were Volha Shamashko, Antonio Jimenez, and this was Black Sky Stop Fake podcast. Subscribe to our channel, comment, and like our videos.